this podcast episode, we will be talking with Martin Lacourt. Martin attended the Swiss Army Officer School in 1989 and has served within the Swiss military as an armed cavalry platoon leader and company commander. In 2001, he joined the International Committee of the Red Cross. Today, Martin Lacourt is the Deputy Head of Delegation and Senior Armed Forces Delegate for the International Committee of the Red Cross at its Paris delegation. With a focus on military and humanitarian collaboration, Martin played a significant role in promoting the RCRC mission, particularly in matters related to armed conflicts, human rights, and international humanitarian law. His work involves fostering cooperation with military entities, ensuring that humanitarian laws, especially the Geneva Conventions, are respected during conflicts. Prior to his current role in Paris, Mr. Lacourt held a similar senior position with the ICRC in Washington, D.C., where he worked closely with U.S. military forces. His responsibilities have been often including bridging the gap between armed forces and humanitarian efforts, as well as addressing complex issues related to evolving warfare technologies and their humanitarian impact. During his 20 years of service, he carried out missions for the International Red Cross Department of Operations in Afghanistan, Colombia, Guinea-Conakry, Haiti, Yemen, Syria, Iraq, and Venezuela, and other conflict zones. His work emphasizes the neutrality, impartiality, and independence of the committee, and he advocates for the promotion of human dignity during warfare. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Portugal is celebrating the 70th anniversary of the 1949 Geneva Conventions, along with the Swiss Confederation Embassy in Lisbon and the Portuguese Red Cross. The Ministry is organizing a conference to raise awareness about humanitarian law and the rules of war. We are very pleased to have Martin Lacourt addressing the conference and to have him here for a conversation about the decisive work of the International Red Cross. Monsieur Martin Lacourt, welcome to Mala Diplomática, the Portuguese Ministry of Foreign Affairs Diplomatic Institute podcast.
Thank you.
A pleasure to have you here.
For welcoming me here with you.
Martin, what is the International Committee of the Red Cross mission and purpose? Sometimes we hear about the differences between the national Red Cross committees, the International Red Cross Committee, and what is the difference also between the Red Cross and the Red Crescent? Can you tell us something about this?
Yes, of course. In fact, the national societies such as the Portuguese Red Cross or the Afghan Red Crescent Society and the ICRC is part of the same movement, and we need to add within this movement the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies. So we are part of the same movement, but we don't do exactly the same. It wouldn't make sense if we had all the same mission. But we all started on the battlefield in Solferino in 1859. And this movement started around two very simple ideas. The wounded and sick of the battlefield were not taking enough care of them. So the first idea was to have each country organizing a corps of volunteer, because we would not call them at that time already, a national society, but a corps of volunteer trained in peacetime to support the military in wartime. And their mission was a medical mission. Mm-hmm. What the founder of the movement, Henri Dunant, witnesses was that most of the wounded on the battlefield were left to die without any kind of, first aid. And we should not think, well, at that time, 1859, anyways, there was no medical services. There were. And life could have been preserved. Or at least some dignity would have been, we would have been able to give to those wounded and sick. So the first idea, let's organize ourselves and have people to take care of the wounded and the sick in the battle. And the second idea, which is fundamental too, is to say, okay, if we have a corps volunteer, if we have people that have the specific mission to take care of the wounded and also take care of the human remains, these persons should be protected by the law and should never be attacked. The personnel should never be attacked, and of course the wounded and the sick should never be attacked. So the movement, again, national societies, might be Red Cross and Red Crescent, and to answer to your question, it's the same movement. It is the same movement. It is a different symbol, if I want to, or emblem, to express myself quite simply, but it's the same. And the rule is, I think, understandable to all. Where Christianity is the predominant religion, you will have a Red Cross society. And when Islam is the predominant religion, you will have a Red Crescent. Let's just point out the example of Indonesia, the most populated Muslim country in the world, and they still use the Red Cross because it was the colonial emblem. Well, it was a Dutch colony, and they already had a chapter in their colonies of their own national societies. And in fact, the Red Cross was not meant to be religious. It was the Swiss flag, and we inverted the colors just to honor the founder that was a Swiss citizen. Okay, so that's maybe to explain a bit the Red Cross, Red Crescent. The ICRC has a mission that is enshrined in treaty law, in the Geneva Convention, in the additional protocols. And its mission holds in a sentence, and it's very easy to understand. It's very more difficult to apply and to operationalize. But the ICRC, in a neutral, impartial manner, is to bring protection to the victims of war, of armed conflict, and also provide them with assistance. Protection means, or it doesn't mean that we're going to try to protect them physically. For the ICRC, protection means that we ask the parties to the conflict to respect the law of armed conflict, the law of IHL. Okay, that's what is protection. This is the definition, the broad definition of protection. And assistance is, if we want to put it simply, it's bringing people what they need to survive. Sometimes it's a surgery, sometimes it's water, sometimes it's heat, sometimes it's food. And this is the other main line of operation of the ICRC. But again, I think the important thing is to note that this mission was given to the ICRC through treaty law, ratified and signed, adopted by the international community.
Very good. So we have the Geneva Conventions and their protocols, the additional protocols. This is the basis, the focus of the center of international humanitarian law. Correct. And this is somehow the field of action of the International Committee of the Red Cross. So you are working in very difficult circumstances in areas where armed conflict has evolved sometimes to terrible situations of suffering of people. And at the same time, we have this international humanitarian law that has not changed very much since 1949. Does this international humanitarian law still prevails? Does it still serves the purpose? Or should we look into it? Some people say that lots of times the belligerents do not abide by the international law. Does this mean that we need to change the law, or does it mean that we need to enforce it more?
Well, obviously, the law exists, and I would really clearly say that the law fit the purpose. It doesn't mean that we don't need to think about the evolution of the battlefield. Of course not. But the basic principles of current international humanitarian law applies. And if there were respected, it would make a huge difference for the people suffering in war, or the people that are living in a war environment. So the issue is not that much the law. The issue is really the respect of the law. And yes, that's really the main problem. You know, you were citing the 1949 Geneva Convention. Sadly, the law of armed conflict always evolved after the wars, and also were based on atrocities that were lived by the human community, by humanity. And it's a very pragmatic law. It is not a law that has the purpose to forbid war. There is another, there is other laws that tries to reach that effect.
Charter
right?
of the United Nations.
The Charter of the United Nations.
Yeah.
But it's a very pragmatical law that has always been based on horror, atrocities stemming from war. And you know, just recalling some basic principle, we need to distinguish between a combatant and a non-combatant. We need to distinguish also the person that was a combatant but that is not anymore a combatant. And those two categories of people should be protected and never attacked. That holds still today.
Yeah.
If only that one was, really respected, I think that we would be able to reduce the suffering in war. War is inhumane, and people say, well, it's to bring, law of armed conflict, IHLs, to bring humanity to war. I'm not sure, but at least we can reduce the size of the human suffering by respecting very basic principles of the law.
In this sense, the International Committee of the Red Cross, working to help non-combatant in conflict zones, helping detainees, humanitarian forensics, becoming a neutral intermediary into the belligerent parts in a conflict, protecting the rights of people in conflict, reconnecting families, responding to sexual violence, sometimes bringing water and shelter to populations. How many people work with you? I can imagine that you need a lot of people to work.
Yes, the organization is working with 18,000 staff in 100 countries. Doesn't mean that all those 100 countries are at war, because maybe it would be interesting now just to say what are the main line of operation of the ICRC. It's protection, we said. And indeed, every ICRC action is based on law. When we try to reunite families that have been separated by the conflict, it is based on the law. The law requires that. When we are trying to identify a mortal remains, it's based on the law. When we visit people deprived of their freedom, might it be prisoners of war, detainees, it's based on the law. And there it's really this protection line of operation, where we try to have the parties to the conflict, the authorities, de facto, state authorities, non-state authorities, respecting the law. The other line of operation, we mentioned it. Yes, indeed, it's assistance, bringing water, bringing food, bringing everything that they need, the people need in order to survive. And the third one, it's all this prevention work. We try to be before the violation, because there is a clear line between violation and assistance. If we were not forcibly displacing people, these people would not need the same amount of assistance. Okay? So there is always a link between the violation and then the need for assistance. If we were not destroying water plants, electricity plants, there would not be this need to bring again water, this need to bring again electricity and heat or cold if cold is needed. So the prevention work is really to try to, before the battle, to conduct this conducive environment for the respect of the law in the conduct of hostilities. Yeah. These are really, and I would mention also the cooperation that we have with the national societies. That's the fourth line of operation. In most of the country where we work also with the national society, because they also understand very well the environment, and they're embedded in the environment, and they know about the problems. So we need also to work with them.
Yeah. So your people on the ground have to work with all the different belligerents forms. And I wonder, so you mentioned the preventive side. This means that you have to work also with the armed forces of countries, I can imagine, to help introduce in their training this respect for humanitarian law. Yeah. This is a very interesting part. On the other hand, when you are on the ground and you need to maintain this neutrality, this impartiality, and taking into account that this podcast will be heard by several of our colleagues, diplomats, how do you work also with diplomats on the ground? Do you work with them? You work with the military. You work with non-state agents also, and the diplomats.
You know, we try to influence people. So, of course, just to answer on the last question about the diplomats, we try to influence state policy. And of course, influencing state diplomacy, one policy, one line of it, it's also engaging with diplomats. Of course, we try to, through dialogue with diplomats, try to influence some decision from the countries, always with the objective to have a better respect. Sometimes we also discuss with diplomats from certain country that might have an influence themselves on another party. Remember that, and again, the law is sometimes very simple. I think it's the first article of the Geneva Convention that says state parties to the conventions must respect and ensure respect of the law. And diplomats can have, through also their influencing, because what is diplomacy about? Yeah. It's also trying to have those maybe actors that need some support for a better respect of the law to be influenced by diplomats. Neutrality and partiality, yes. Thank you for the question, because I think it's very important to understand those two notions. Sometimes it's a bit confused. What's the difference between neutrality and impartiality? So there is a very easy way to understand it. Impartiality is a notion that you link to the victims. And you don't pick and choose your victims. Or if you pick and choose them, only on the needs. Yeah. Okay? Neutrality, it's a notion that you will link to the parties to the conflict. And you don't take sides. You don't take sides. So you don't say, just to say it, quite simply again, you don't say good guys, bad guys. Yeah. But sometimes people think that neutrality is silence, and it is not. Because, again, remember, protection, influencing all parties to the conflict on better respecting the law. That means that we discuss with all the parties, but, not in a public manner. And we link to that this notion of confidential bilateral dialogue. The objective is impartiality. Neutrality is a tool to be able to apply impartiality, meaning that I don't have front lines. I can cross the front lines because there are needs on that side and there are other needs on this side. And if I'm not neutral, and if I'm criticizing one of the parties, I won't be able, I know. Yeah. And we know we won't be able to, attend the human suffering that is in that region that is under control of that specific authority. So really, these are that's very important to understand the difference between the two, and the fact that it does not mean silence.
Yeah.
Being neutral does not mean that we're silent.
Absolutely.
And of course, we need to be humble. There are parties to the conflict with whom it's impossible to have a discussion.
A discussion, yeah.
For many reasons, but it's impossible.
Yeah. So is this the reason, Martin, why the International Committee of the Red Cross is so discreet sometimes about its work, to have this capacity to be there, to influence, being discreet at the same time?
Yes. We like to say that we are the voice of the victims and only the voice of the victims. And yes, there is a need of discretion. We have also a rule that says we can say what we do, but not what we see. And again, all this discretion, it's not because we are shy, but we're aiming at impartiality. Mm-hmm. And again, if we go in, a public statement about taking side in a certain way, or it will be taken as, taking a side for one of the parties, we will lose this capacity to go across front lines.
Yeah. We were talking about the 75th anniversary of the Geneva Conventions, and the relevance that this international humanitarian law has in trying to limit the suffering of people caught under conflict. We talked already about the question that is this international law system enough? Do we need more? Do we need more since we have now different technologies at stake? We have cybersecurity or cyber weapons. We have new systems powered by artificial intelligence. What can we do to have the law that is continue? You told me that you feel that the conventions still serve their purpose, but do we need something new, or do we need something more? And at the same time, we see this terrible trends, a world increasingly divided, affected by international, regional, local conflicts. And I can imagine that you are working more than ever. And there is a lot of work to be done. Is the international law responding? And how is the committee responding to all these challenges?
I think that the ICRC has always been working more than ever. Remember, where are these Geneva Convention of 1949 stemming from?
Yes.
From the Second
World War. The Second War, yeah.
And I also believe, again, that the law is fit to purpose. But yes, maybe not always being a war late and develop the law after atrocities if we could prevent. So build a law that is, already preventing the use of certain weapon system is, I think it's wise. Again, if you think about the end receivers, the victims, if they are not in capacity to drink, drinkable water, if it's coming from just a bomb that destroyed the water plants, or if it's coming by a cyber attack that paralyzed
the system, the distribution,
they will still be thirsty.
Yeah.
And it's exactly the same principle of distinguishing the effect that you will bring on the battlefield and distinguishing between the protected people and combatant fighters, part of the military effort.
Yeah. Martin, you have been in everywhere, in Afghanistan, in Syria, in Sudan, in Colombia. Tell us a little bit of your experience. how your personal experience connects with all this, and to make it sometimes easier for people to understand your role in not only supporting the victims of a conflict, but also taking into account the questions, for instance, of missing people that is so relevant in some of these conflicts. Can you tell us a little, some of your experience on this matter?
Yes. Yes, I can share a bit of experience, but the really first thing that I want to say is that at least in this job of being a delegate of the ICRC, you need to be resistant to frustration. Mm-hmm. I think that's very important. And also acknowledge that all the small progress that the institution provokes, all the change of behaviors that the institution provokes, it is somewhere a success that will also enable you to resist to the maybe the permanent frustration. It's not as good as we wanted. The suffering is very high and still too high. But I think that is very important. As an experience also, I would like to highlight the quality of my colleagues and their spirit. And as you said, more than 20 years with the ICRC, it has not changed. When you go at the field level of ICRC's operation, you find the same people committed to protect, assist, and preventing violation, and being with the victims. Then, you were mentioning the dimension of missing people. And thank you for this, because first, it's the core mission of the ICRC to support families to be reunited, deceased people to go back somewhere home. And it's not only a legal requirement. In my experience, it's one of the first humanitarian needs that is always expressed by the communities I've been in contact with. Yeah. It was not about water, it was not about food, it was not really about protection, it was about that. Where's my uncle? Where's my sister?
My son.
Where's my son? And I think that's the dimension of the war or the human suffering that should not be neglected. And then we always say, okay, IHL, it's the law within the war. And its purpose is not to reach peace. But anyways, a better respect of the law of armed conflict, I am really convinced of that. It's the healing process when peace arrives is stronger and easier. And if you look at certain countries, they are still 20 years, 40 years after the conflict, looking for their missing people, looking for their disappeared people. And I think that's also the link between it, not only on the missing issue, but the more you behave accordingly to the law, I think that has the strategic effect of maybe making the war shorter and the peace longer.
Now we are seeing all the situations around the world where civilians are not respected, where infrastructures are being hit, civilian infrastructures, schools, hospitals. And some people say that the international humanitarian law is really being put aside because it's difficult to deal with it, and we see more and more human suffering. And is the International Red Cross Committee having enough resources to deal with this?
Yes, I think I can understand your question. There is a volume of suffering.
Incredible.
There is a volume of suffering that has always been too big for one organization. Never the ICRC, even in the best condition, would have been capable to address all the suffering, or because of a lack of access. So this is not a question of means, trucking or goods and all that, but just because you don't have access, or because you don't have the capacity to respond to the human suffering and the human needs. So there, of course, it's a collective responsibility. The ICA has its specific role, but it's not only the ICRC to tackle that. And for sure, and again, the best way to reduce the need for people in a war environment, it's respecting the law. It's as simple as that. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, so here we have an organization that is independent, neutral, dedicated to providing humanitarian protection and assistance to victims of armed conflict and other situations of violence. It works around the protection and assisting victims of conflict, around the protection and compliance also with international humanitarian law, visiting detainees also, facilitating this humanitarian dialogue, engaging in this confidential dialogue with state and non-state actors, restoring family links, looking for missing people, promoting such international humanitarian law, and being there in the middle of the conflict. Have you ever been afraid there?
Yes. Yes, clearly, maybe less than some other colleagues because of where I was sent, but clearly, and there really to go into the personal side, you're not that afraid when you are under the bullets. You are really afraid when you don't know if it's going to happen or not. So there is a difference being, too close of a battle, and being in an ICRC car between A and B, and things happen on that street or in that road, and you don't know if it will happen to you. But I guess maybe it's exactly the contrary. Yeah. But for me, it was that. So yes, and let's never forget that we almost every year have people that are wounded or killed. And sadly enough, more than a month ago, we had 3 colleagues killed in Ukraine.
In Ukraine, yes.
So it is yes, dangerous. We work in dangerous environments, but precisely if we are able to project neutrality, independence, of course, impartiality, we are more protected than if not. The thickness of our armor will depend on how we are perceived. Yeah. Perceived aligned with the party to a conflict, it becomes really, really thin. Perceived being, truly neutral. Not flawless, but truly neutral. Truly aiming at impartiality. Then the armor becomes thicker and thicker.
Yeah. And what is the feeling of talking with a man that has his hands full of blood?
There is let's call it a humanitarian necessity to talk with all.
Absolutely.
I think that's really important to understand, because that creates space for maybe slow, maybe doing step-by-step progresses, but only at least aiming at progresses, aiming at accessing the victims. You need to talk to everyone. So the notion of pariah, people you don't want to sit with, you don't want to talk to, does not exist. And if you do have an issue with that, you need to change organization. You need to change organization. That's very clear.
Yeah.
And sometimes it doesn't work. But the duty of the ICRC is to try to establish this dialogue. That's really clear, because when it does not work, you lose access. You don't have access to the people you're mandated to support and to help.
Yeah, you were there for the victims, whatever victims they are.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's the main thing, and this somehow requires, this way of thinking requires that we are dedicated to people, and this sense that a sense of mission.
Yeah.
How can we normal citizens support you? How can we support the International Committee of the Red Cross? Because I can imagine that we can support you by our own perception of what you do, by speaking about what you do, the relevance of the work of the Red Cross. But at the same time, maybe we can do something more. And in particular, diplomats, what can we do to support you?
Well, of course, we always expect from nation, from states, to support financially the ICRC, of course. Yeah. That's one thing. Again, support the mission of the ICRC, support the respect of the law by voicing, as a state, as a nation, the importance of the respect of the law. That's an enormous success. Or support, at least, because if we start not talking about it, it is not good. Now, if we talk about the civilian society, I think, but they need to know. I think that the normal citizen in the street should just not accept the unacceptable and voice the fact that they don't accept the unacceptable. I think that's part also of building this environment that is conducive to the respect of the law. It's just saying, and going back to the very basic principle of the law of armed conflict. Yeah. There are things that are not acceptable, and there are things as humankind we decided that we would not commit anymore in war. Yeah. But the role of the nation, they are those who signed, ratified, adopted IHL, Geneva Convention, the protocols and all that. Yeah. So, supporting the ICRC, that's not really the purpose. It's more supporting the victims. It's just having less victims. And there you have the greatest, as nations, you have the greatest responsibility and duty toward those people affected by armed conflict.
Yeah. So there is a duty of nations. There is also a duty of all of us as citizens to find in the middle of the chaotic situation of a war, in the middle of the most terrifying conflict, there are rules that people have to abide by. So even in the most difficult situations, even the most horrific wars have rules. And we have to make sure that these rules are kept. So I think this is indeed a very important thing for all of us. If people want to get more information about the International Committee of Red Cross and its activities, where can they get it? They can get at your web pages, everywhere. Exactly. There is information, I can imagine.
We were talking about the digital age. Well, you just go on icrc.org, O-R-G, and you click the question that you want to ask about the Geneva Convention, how does it protect? And by the way, since we are together today and sort of celebrating, even if everything is not always like, do we really want to celebrate when we are living what we are living? You can also find thousands of examples where the law did protect people. because we always have this notion or idea that the law does not work in war. Yeah. It does not work. Why should I? It's about life and death. Yeah. But in fact, it works. When it's applied, it does work. And compliance again is the main issue.
Very good. So this year, where we celebrate the 75th anniversary of the International Conventions of Geneva, and we are going to do this here in Portugal through different events in universities. So the citizens matter. The citizens can really do volunteer work, service for the Red Cross, the Portuguese Red Cross or the International Committee of the Red Cross. They can do donations, they can get information, they can have their voices being heard about the need to keep the rules of law, of the rule of law still in situations where conflict and suffering is at its height.
And thank you for doing all those effort also with the Portuguese National Society to spread, knowledge of the existence of a law, of the existence of an effective law when respected. And I think that's really, really indeed important. And that's a way to support the communities that are in war-ridden region and countries.
Thank you very much, Martin, for sharing with us all your experience and your work. And dear colleagues, we keep on working on these matters that are so relevant for all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.